She was left because she couldn't walk, but a lonely farmer knew love didn't see limits. The morning sun slowly rose over the quiet countryside, painting the fields in soft gold. Birds moved through the sky, and the wind carried the smell of fresh soil and growing crops. Life in the village followed a simple rhythm. Farmers woke early, children walked to school, and neighbors greeted each other along dusty roads. It looked peaceful from the outside, but for Lila, the world felt very different. She sat near the window of her small home, watching people pass by. The same road she once walked freely had become something she only observed from a distance. Years earlier, an accident had changed everything. What once felt like an ordinary day turned into a moment that reshaped her future. Since then, moving had become difficult, and she relied on support just to manage daily tasks. At first, people had surrounded her with sympathy. Friends visited often, bringing flowers, stories, and promises that nothing would change. Her family tried to stay strong, telling her she would adapt and find new ways to live. But as time passed, visits became less frequent. Conversations grew shorter. The world outside continued moving forward, while she felt stuck in the same place. Lila learned quickly that pity and patience were not the same. Pity faded when life became inconvenient. The hardest moment came when the man she had once trusted deeply decided to leave. He had spoken kindly, saying he wished her well, but his eyes revealed fear of a future he did not want to face. After he left, silence filled her home in a way that felt heavier than loneliness. She stopped expecting people to stay. Days blended together. She created routines to make time pass more easily. She watered the small plants on her windowsill, listened to old music, and read books that carried her into worlds where limits did not exist. Yet every evening, when shadows stretched across the floor, she felt the quiet weight of being forgotten. Outside, neighbors spoke in soft voices when passing her house. Some believed they were being respectful, but their distance felt like a wall she could not cross. Children who once waved now walked past quickly, unsure of what to say. Even well-meaning gestures sometimes reminded her of how different her life had become. One afternoon, she decided to sit outside instead of staying hidden indoors. The air was warm, and the sky held long white clouds drifting slowly across blue space. She positioned herself near the roadside, hoping to feel part of the world again. People passed by with carts and bicycles, some nodding politely, others avoiding eye contact. She tried not to let it hurt. A tractor rumbled down the road, pulling a small trailer filled with vegetables. The driver slowed as he approached her. He was a tall man with sun-worn hands and calm eyes. This was Daniel, a farmer known for keeping to himself. He rarely joined village gatherings and preferred the quiet company of his fields. He noticed her sitting there alone, watching the world with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. Unlike others, he did not look away quickly. He simply stopped the tractor and greeted her with a gentle nod. "Good morning," he said. His voice was steady and simple, without hesitation. Lila returned the greeting, unsure what else to say. Most conversations with strangers ended quickly, but Daniel remained for a moment longer. He asked about the weather, then about her plants, noticing the small pots beside her chair.
The questions were ordinary, yet they felt different because they were not filled with pity.
He spoke to her as if she were just another person in the village. The conversation lasted only a few minutes before he continued on his way. But after he left, Lila felt something she had not experienced in a long time. A quiet warmth. It was not excitement or hope yet, only the gentle reminder that genuine connection still existed. Over the next few days, she found herself watching the road again, wondering if he would pass by. When he did, he stopped briefly, sometimes bringing fresh vegetables or sharing small stories from the farm. He never stayed long enough to make her uncomfortable, and he never treated his visits like charity. Daniel had always lived a simple life. After losing his parents years earlier, he inherited the farm and worked tirelessly to maintain it. The land gave him purpose, but it also kept him isolated. Conversations with others often felt forced, so he avoided them. Yet with Lila, speaking felt easy. He admired her quiet strength, the way she listened carefully and smiled even when sadness lingered behind her eyes. For Lila, these small interactions slowly changed the shape of her days. She began waking with curiosity instead of heaviness. She adjusted her routine so she could sit outside when he usually passed by, though she told herself it was only for fresh air. One evening, dark clouds gathered quickly, bringing strong winds and rain. Lila struggled to bring her plants indoors before the storm worsened. Suddenly, Daniel appeared, having noticed her from the road. Without hesitation, he helped move everything safely inside. They stood together by the doorway, watching rain fall in long silver lines. "Storms pass," he said quietly. She nodded, understanding that his words carried more meaning than weather alone. After that day, their conversations grew longer. They spoke about childhood memories, favorite foods, and small dreams they had never shared with anyone else. Lila realized she was laughing again, and the sound surprised her. Still, she remained cautious. Experience had taught her that people could disappear without warning. She avoided asking personal questions, afraid of creating expectations. Daniel sensed her hesitation but did not push. He believed trust grew slowly, like crops that needed time and patience. The village continued its usual rhythm, but something subtle had changed for Lila. She no longer felt completely invisible. The world seemed slightly brighter, and even ordinary moments felt meaningful. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, Daniel stopped and sat beside her for a while. They watched the sky turn shades of orange and pink. "You like sunsets?" he asked. "Yes," she replied softly. "They remind me that endings can still be beautiful." He smiled, understanding more than she expected. As darkness approached, he stood to leave, but before walking away, he said something simple that stayed with her long after he disappeared down the road. "I'll see you tomorrow." The words were ordinary, yet to Lila they felt powerful. Someone expected to return. Someone chose to come back. That night, as she prepared for sleep, she realized that the heavy silence of her home felt different. It was no longer empty. It held anticipation. Days slowly turned into weeks, and Daniel's visits became part of Lila's daily rhythm. At first, she tried to treat them like ordinary moments, telling herself that he was only being kind. But kindness that stayed consistent felt different from the temporary attention she had known before. Each morning she listened carefully for the distant sound of his tractor. The quiet rumble would grow louder as he approached the road near her home. When she heard it, a small smile would appear on her face without her realizing it. She began to prepare tea before he arrived, placing 2 cups on the small wooden table outside. Daniel never arrived with grand gestures. Sometimes he brought fresh vegetables from the farm, carrots, tomatoes, or warm bread he picked up from the village bakery. Other days he simply stopped to talk for a few minutes before continuing his work. The simplicity of his presence made her feel calm. Their conversation stayed light at first. They spoke about the weather, crops growing in the fields, and stories from the village. Daniel told her about a stubborn goat that refused to follow instructions and how it reminded him of himself when he was younger. Lila laughed softly, and the sound surprised both of them. It had been a long time since laughter came so easily to her. Little by little, their talks grew deeper. One afternoon, she asked him why he spent so much time alone on the farm. He shrugged and said he had always been more comfortable with silence than crowds. After losing his parents, he had learned to rely on himself. The farm gave him purpose, but it did not replace human connection. Lila listened carefully. She understood loneliness more than most people. As the days passed, she noticed that Daniel never looked at her with sympathy. He asked for her opinions and listened when she spoke. When she suggested ways to grow herbs near his farmhouse, he took her advice seriously. For the first time in years, she felt useful instead of fragile. However, inside her heart, doubt still lived quietly. She wondered how long this friendship would last. Would he eventually grow tired? Would the reality of her limitations become too heavy for him? These questions stayed hidden behind her gentle smiles. One morning, Daniel arrived later than usual. Lila felt restless, checking the road again and again. When he finally appeared, she realized how much she had begun to depend on his visits. The realization frightened her. She reminded herself not to expect too much. "I had to fix a broken fence," he explained as he parked nearby. She nodded, pretending that she had not been waiting. They drank tea together, watching the clouds move slowly across the sky. Daniel noticed that she seemed quieter than usual. "Something wrong?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "No, just thinking." He did not push further. Instead, he began telling her about a new crop he wanted to try planting. His calm voice slowly eased her tension, and she felt grateful for his patience. Over time, small routines formed between them. Sometimes he read aloud from old books he found at the market. Other times they played simple guessing games, imagining stories about strangers who passed by. These moments felt ordinary, but for Lila they were extraordinary, because they filled the emptiness she had carried for so long. The village began to notice their growing friendship. Some people smiled kindly, but others whispered behind closed doors. A few believed Daniel was wasting his time. Others assumed he felt sorry for her. Rumors traveled quickly in small communities, and Lila heard fragments of conversations that made her heart heavy. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped to talk to Daniel while Lila sat nearby. The man joked loudly, asking why a strong farmer would choose to spend his free time with someone who could not walk. The words were spoken casually, but they felt sharp. Daniel's expression changed. He replied calmly, saying that time spent with good people was never wasted. After the neighbor left, silence lingered between them. Lila stared at the ground, embarrassed and hurt. "You don't have to defend me," she said quietly. "I wasn't defending you," he answered gently. "I was speaking the truth." His words stayed with her long after he left that day. Despite the comfort she felt around him, Lila struggled with the fear of becoming a burden. She avoided asking for help, even when tasks were difficult. One evening, she tried to move a heavy box by herself and nearly lost balance. Daniel arrived just in time to steady her. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said. She looked away, her voice soft. "I don't want people to feel responsible for me." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Helping someone you care about isn't responsibility. It's choice." The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. She did not know how to respond. As autumn approached, the air became cooler, and golden leaves covered the ground. Daniel invited her to visit the farm one afternoon. At first she hesitated, unsure whether she would feel comfortable outside her usual environment. But curiosity won over fear. He arranged everything carefully so she could move easily around the farmhouse yard. The place was simple but welcoming, filled with the smell of fresh hay and earth. Animals moved calmly nearby, and the open sky stretched endlessly above them. Lila felt a sense of freedom she had not experienced in years. They spent hours talking and watching the sunset. Daniel showed her the fields where he worked every day, explaining how seasons changed the land. She realized how much patience farming required, planting seeds without immediate results, trusting time to do its work. It reminded her of their friendship. As evening fell, they sat quietly, sharing comfortable silence. Lila felt both happy and afraid. Happiness made her vulnerable, and vulnerability meant risk. On the way back home, she thanked him for the day. He nodded, smiling slyly. "You should come again," he said. She agreed, though part of her wondered if she deserved such kindness. That night she lay awake thinking about how much her life had changed since he entered it. The loneliness that once felt endless now had moments of light. Still, she worried about what would happen if everything disappeared again. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself thinking about her more often than he expected. He admired her resilience, the way she faced each day despite challenges. Her presence made his own life feel less empty. The friendship between them had grown quietly but deeply, like roots spreading beneath the soil. Neither of them used the word love yet, but something stronger than simple friendship was beginning to form. As the seasons changed, the bond between Lila and Daniel continued to grow in quiet but meaningful ways. What had started as simple conversations by the roadside had become something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet. They shared laughter more often, and long silences between them felt comfortable instead of awkward. But with deeper connection came deeper fears. Lila noticed small changes within herself. She looked forward to Daniel's visits more than anything else in her day. She began planning small surprises for him, like baking simple snacks or finding interesting stories to share. These gestures made her happy, yet they also scared her. She had once trusted someone with her heart, only to feel abandoned later. The memory remained like a shadow that followed her quietly. One afternoon, as they sat outside watching clouds move slowly across the sky, Daniel spoke about expanding his farm. He mentioned new responsibilities and longer workdays. Lila listened carefully, but inside she felt a strange heaviness. She wondered if his growing responsibilities would slowly pull him away from her. "You're going to be very busy," she said gently. "That's true," he replied. "But busy doesn't mean I forget important things." She nodded, but doubt still whispered in her mind. Meanwhile, Daniel noticed that Lila had become quieter in recent days. She smiled less and sometimes avoided looking directly at him. He sensed that something was troubling her but waited patiently, believing she would speak when she felt ready. The village gossip continued as well. Some people admired their friendship, while others questioned it. A few suggested that Daniel was sacrificing too much of his time. Others assumed that Lila depended on him too much. Though Daniel ignored most of these comments, Lila heard them clearly, and they planted seeds of insecurity. One evening, after overhearing a conversation between two neighbors who doubted Daniel's choices, she felt a deep wave of sadness. She began to believe that she was holding him back from a better life. That night she sat alone by the window, watching the stars appear one by one. The quiet felt heavier than usual. She told herself that she needed to protect him from becoming trapped in a life he might regret later. The next day, when Daniel arrived, she greeted him with a forced smile. They spoke briefly about ordinary things, but the warmth between them felt different. Finally, she took a deep breath and said something that surprised him. "Maybe you shouldn't come here so often anymore." Daniel froze, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Why would you say that? You have a life, a farm, responsibilities. I don't want to be something that stops you from moving forward." He felt a sudden ache in his chest. "You're not stopping me, but people talk," she continued quietly. "And maybe they're right. You deserve someone who can walk beside you without making things harder." Her words were calm, but her eyes revealed fear. Daniel sat silently for a moment, choosing his response carefully. "Do you think I come here because I feel forced?"
She hesitated. "I don't know."
"Because being here feels right." Despite his reassurance, she struggled to believe him fully. Years of rejection had taught her to expect people to leave eventually. After that conversation, a distance grew between them. Daniel still visited, but their talks felt more careful, as if both were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Lila avoided sharing her deeper thoughts, and Daniel worried that he had somehow failed to make her feel secure. At the same time, pressure from Daniel's relatives increased. During a family gathering, one of his cousins suggested that he needed a partner who could help physically with farm work. Another asked whether he planned to build a future with someone who required extra care. These comments frustrated him, but they also made him think deeply about practical challenges. That night he walked alone through his fields, listening to the sound of wind moving through tall grass. He wondered if love could truly overcome the obstacles people described. He cared deeply for Lila, but he also wanted to make wise decisions for the future. Days passed with unspoken tension. Then one evening, a powerful storm arrived unexpectedly. Dark clouds covered the sky, and heavy rain began falling quickly. Strong winds shook trees and rattled windows. Daniel immediately thought of Lila and drove toward her home despite the difficult weather. When he arrived, he found her sitting inside with candles lit, trying to stay calm. The electricity had gone out, and the house felt cold and lonely. Seeing him standing in the doorway brought relief she could not hide. "You didn't have to come in this weather," she said. "I wanted to make sure you were safe," he replied. They spent the evening talking by candlelight while rain fell loudly outside. The storm created a sense of isolation, as if the world had paused just for them. In that quiet space, honesty became easier.
I'm afraid, Lila admitted finally. Every time someone gets close to me, I think about the moment they might leave.
Daniel listened carefully. I understand fear, he said, but leaving because of fear only guarantees loneliness. She looked at him, tears forming in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. I don't want to hold you back, she whispered. You don't, he answered firmly. You give my life meaning. The sincerity in his voice made her heart race. For the first time, she realized that their connection was not one-sided. He needed her just as much as she needed him. The storm continued through the night, but inside the small house something changed between them. Walls built from past pain began to soften. By morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through clouds, shining across the fields. Daniel helped repair small damages around her home before preparing to leave. Before he stepped outside, he turned toward her. We don't have to decide everything today, he said gently. Let's just keep moving forward together. After the storm passed, life seemed quieter, but inside both Lila and Daniel something had shifted. Their conversation during the storm had opened a door that could not easily be closed again. They had spoken honestly about fear and loneliness, and although the future remained uncertain, they felt closer than before. In the following days, Daniel continued visiting, but now there was a deeper understanding between them. They did not need to fill every moment with words. Sometimes they simply sat together, watching birds move across the sky, or listening to the wind through nearby trees. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt safe. Lila noticed that Daniel's presence gave her a sense of stability she had never experienced before. He did not promise dramatic changes or perfect solutions. Instead, he showed care through small actions, fixing a loose step near her door, bringing fresh flowers from the fields, or asking about her thoughts on decisions related to the farm. These simple gestures slowly changed how she saw herself. Instead of feeling like someone waiting for life to happen, she began to feel like a participant again. One afternoon, Daniel arrived with an idea that surprised her. I want you to come to the farm more often, he said carefully, not just as a visitor.
I think you could help me with planning and organizing.
I don't know anything about farming. You know about people, he replied. And you see things differently than I do. That matters. At first she hesitated. Fear of failure still lived inside her, whispering that she might not be capable. But Daniel's confidence in her made her consider the possibility. The next day, he arranged everything so she could move comfortably around the farmhouse. He had built small ramps and adjusted furniture to create easier access. When she saw the effort he had made, emotion filled her chest. You didn't have to do all this, she said softly. I wanted to, he answered simply. Standing there, she realized that he was not trying to change her or fix her life. He was creating space for her to belong. They began spending more time at the farm together. Lila helped him track expenses, plan crop rotations, and communicate with buyers from nearby towns. Her natural attention to detail surprised him. She noticed patterns he had overlooked and suggested small improvements that made his work easier. Daniel felt proud watching her confidence grow. He saw how her eyes brightened when she felt useful, and he admired her determination. Of course, not everything was easy. Some days brought frustration. There were moments when physical limitations made tasks slower or more complicated. During those times, Lila sometimes became quiet, worried that she was causing inconvenience. Daniel responded with patience, reminding her that challenges were part of every partnership. Meanwhile, villagers continued observing their growing closeness. Some people began changing their opinions after seeing how happy they seemed together. Others still doubted whether their relationship could last. One evening during a small gathering at the local market, Lila heard someone say that Daniel deserved a simpler life. The comment hurt, but instead of retreating into silence, she decided to face her feelings. Later that night, she shared her thoughts with him. Do you ever feel like people expect you to choose a different path? She asked. He thought for a moment before answering. People always have opinions, but they don't live my life. Only I decide what feels right. His calm certainty brought her comfort, Yet she knew that real life included practical realities too. Love required effort from both sides. As weeks passed, they developed new routines together. Mornings started with coffee on the porch while discussing plans for the day. Afternoons involved working on projects around the farm, and evenings often ended with long conversations under the open sky. During one of these evenings, Lila spoke about her dreams for the future, something she had not done in years. She imagined creating a small garden space where visitors could relax and feel welcome. Daniel listened carefully, encouraged by her vision. "Let's make it happen," he said. Together they began designing the space, choosing plants and arranging paths that allowed easy movement. The process became symbolic of their relationship, building something beautiful through teamwork and patience. However, emotional challenges still appeared unexpectedly. One day, after a difficult task left her exhausted, Lila felt overwhelmed by frustration. She worried that despite her efforts, she might never fully overcome the limitations she faced. "I wish things were easier," she admitted quietly. Daniel sat beside her. "Life isn't easy for anyone," he said gently. "But that doesn't mean it can't be meaningful." His words did not remove her struggles, but they reminded her that she was not alone. Over time, she began to see herself through his eyes, not as someone defined by what she could not do, but by her resilience and kindness. This new perspective slowly healed parts of her heart that had been wounded by years of doubt. Daniel also changed. Before meeting Lila, he had focused only on work, believing that independence meant strength. Now he understood that sharing life with another person created a different kind of strength. He felt more open, more willing to express emotions he had once kept hidden. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden space, a group of children from the village stopped to watch. They asked questions and laughed freely, treating Lila like any other adult. The moment felt special because it showed how perspectives could change when people saw genuine connection. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with warm colors, Daniel paused and looked at her. "You've changed this place," he said. She smiled softly. Maybe it changed me too. Their relationship had grown into something steady and real. Not perfect, but honest. They had learned to face challenges together instead of hiding from them. Time moved forward quietly, and with every passing week, the farm began to feel less like Daniel's place and more like something they both shared. What started as small changes slowly turned into a new rhythm of life. Lila no longer felt like a visitor when she arrived. She felt like she belonged. The garden they had created together became a symbol of their journey. Flowers grew in soft colors along the pathways, and benches allowed people to sit and enjoy the peaceful space. Villagers who once watched from a distance now stopped by to admire what had been built. Some brought seeds or plants as gifts, showing respect in their own quiet ways. For Lila, these moments carried deep meaning. Not long ago, she had believed she would always remain hidden from the world. Now she found herself welcoming others, sharing stories, and smiling without forcing it. The heavy loneliness she once carried had slowly lifted. Daniel noticed these changes too. He admired how she encouraged others with simple kindness. She listened carefully when people spoke, making them feel seen and valued. Watching her grow more confident filled him with pride. One morning, as sunlight spread across the fields, they sat together on the porch drinking coffee. The air felt fresh, and birds moved through the sky in gentle patterns. "You seem happier lately," he said. She looked at the fields before answering. "I feel like I'm finally living again."
He smiled softly.
Hearing those words meant more to him than she realized. Despite the peace they had built, life continued to bring challenges. One season, heavy rain damaged part of the crop, creating financial pressure. Daniel worked longer hours, trying to recover losses. Leela supported him by organizing schedules and helping him communicate with buyers, but she worried about how much responsibility he carried. One evening, she found him sitting alone near the barn, looking tired. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself," she said gently. He laughed quietly.
I've been doing that for years. It's a hard habit to break.
She placed a hand on his arm. You don't have to do it alone anymore." Her words stayed with him. For the first time, he allowed himself to accept help fully, realizing that partnership meant sharing both burdens and victories. As time passed, their relationship grew deeper and more natural. They celebrated small successes together. A good harvest, a kind letter from a visitor, or simply a peaceful evening after a long day. Their bond was built from everyday moments rather than dramatic events. One afternoon, a young couple visiting the farm asked how long they had been together. The question surprised them both. They looked at each other and laughed softly, unsure how to answer. "We've just been walking the same path," Daniel said finally. Lila felt warmth in her chest at his words. Later that evening, she thought about how far she had come. There had been a time when she believed love was something she could no longer experience. Now she realized that love had arrived quietly, growing through patience and trust rather than grand declarations. However, she still carried one fear deep inside, the fear that she might one day lose everything again. One night under a sky filled with stars, she decided to share this fear openly. "I sometimes worry that happiness won't last," she admitted. "That something will take it away." Daniel listened carefully before responding. "Nothing in life is guaranteed," he said gently. "But that doesn't mean we stop choosing what makes us feel alive." His honesty comforted her more than any promise could. Days turned into months, and seasons changed once again. The farm became known as a welcoming place where people felt calm and accepted. Travelers stopped by, drawn by the peaceful atmosphere. Some stayed to talk with Lila, inspired by her resilience and kindness. Through these interactions, she discovered a new purpose, helping others who felt lost or uncertain. She shared her story not as something sad, but as proof that life could change in unexpected ways. Daniel watched her with admiration. He had once believed he was simply offering support, but now he understood that she had changed his life just as deeply. She had taught him to open his heart, to see beyond routine, and to value connection over isolation. One quiet evening, as the sun began to set, Daniel stood beside her in the garden they had created together. The sky turned shades of gold and orange, reminding them of the early days when they first watched sunsets side by side.
"I never thought my life would look like this," he said softly. "Neither did I," she replied.
He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "But I wouldn't change it for anything." She turned toward him, feeling emotion rise in her chest. In that moment, she realized that love did not come from perfect circumstances. It came from choosing someone again and again, even when life felt uncertain. Their journey had not removed challenges or difficulties, but it had given them strength to face them together. Over time, villagers who once doubted them began sharing their story as an example of patience and genuine care. People saw that love did not depend on physical ability or outward expectations. It grew from respect, understanding, and the courage to see another person fully. For Lila, the greatest change was internal. She no longer saw herself as someone left behind. She saw herself as someone who had found a new path, one shaped by resilience and supported by genuine connection. For Daniel, love had transformed loneliness into purpose. He no longer walked through life alone. He walked beside someone who understood him deeply. As night settled over the fields and stars filled the sky, they sat together quietly, knowing that their story was not defined by what had been lost, but by what they had built together.